Hey climbers, and welcome or welcome back to the Treehouse. My name's Ree and this is a tarot tree, and in today's video I thought we'd have a little look at some tales from the tarot. Been thinking about making a tag for this, not quite sure what it's going to be called yet. Probably storytelling decks, and it's basically, it is what's in the name. For us to look through our collections and see what decks we have, like, to offer that sort of element of story about them, you know, whether they come from, you know, some fiction or non-fiction that we have in this world written down already, whether they just seem to have a lore of their own, anything of that nature. I thought it'd be really cool if you're an oldie here. If you've been on this channel for a little while, you know I'm a great lover of stories, particularly folk tales, myths, legends, and things of that nature. I feel that stories can be very healing. I think it's a wonderful way, cross cultures, for millennia, we as humans have, you know, shared wisdom, reflected, you know. I feel like stories give us those moments of introspection to help with our growth, to help with our healing, and it's really cool to see that married in our tarot decks. I mean, after all, the tarot system is a story, particularly the major arcana. You know, it's the Fool's story, the Fool's journey. It's the human, you know, the story of the human condition, you know, all the trials and tribulations we have to go through in order to kind of elevate as people and souls. So why not? And I won't lie, this tag is in some part a shameless attempt for me to just get you guys to join in and show me more decks that I can buy in this vein, because I love them so much. So please get involved if this is up your alley, and without further ado, let's get started. So first out the blocks, I was thinking of kind of somewhat doing this in some sort of system, which is new for me. We'll see it all crash and burn within the first 5 minutes, I guess, probably. But I thought maybe we should start with the storytelling decks I have in my collection that are linked to particular stories that a lot of us are familiar with, you know, from the world of fiction, you know, and how they've been married in a lot of tarot decks. So I'll speak a little bit about why I love these sort of decks, what they mean to me, and how they actually help me and help me understand tarot. So without further ado, first up is a pretty new offering, but one I've had my eye on for ages, and I'm so happy I brought it into my collection. I don't know why I waited so long for it, and that is the Tarot of the Little Prince, a wonderful deck from a very wonderful, very renowned story, or children's book, although I see it more as a universal fable, to be honest, and it is quite dark in parts for kids. I don't know. You know, it's very poignant for them to read and learn at a young age, I'm sure, but it was just as poignant for me to read as an adult, because this is when I first actually read this book, believe it or not. I'd seen it around a lot as a child, but never got around to reading it. I actually watched there was a French animation house that made a really good film about this quite a couple of years ago now. I would suggest you watch it if you're a fan of this book, because it done it so well. It was so profound how they told the story and added some bits on. So check it out. But yeah, I watched that before I even got around to reading this, but it fast became one of my favorite, you know, fables. And what can I say about this deck? It really speaks. It really speaks to me, not because I'm just, you know, emotionally attached to Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's story, as it were, but because it speaks so well to the Fool's journey, you know. There's quite a few things that make this deck good, but we'll start there. Is there a better fool than our little prince? You know, he really speaks to that energy, doesn't he? When you know his adventure, what he has to do, the choices he has to make, even to the characters he's meeting throughout this book. It's basically like the major arcana, you know. I always see the Fool's journey as, you know, you being the fool and meeting these characters along the way. There was a wonderful, I think it might be Bronya K. I love her channel, definitely check it out. If it was her, I'll put that video in the link, of her telling, you know, the story of the Fool, in a way of the Fool meeting these characters. And this is exactly what our little prince does, to kind of learn and grow, you know, in this life, and take this Two of Wands moment, take his Three of Wands moment, and move forward. So I really couldn't think of a better story that really marries with that major arcana journey than this. So I'm so glad it's been done, and so well done. You know, it really speaks to that storytelling element within the tarot already, and it actually helps me come to a better understanding of it because of the connection I've made to this story through reading it. You know, the emotions it brought up, the understanding it unlocked in me, gives me a bit more of a deeper sort of perspective on the cards, you know, because I'm seeing this Fool, he's become more, you know, more animated, more real, you know, as this little prince character now to me, you know, and how he reflects aspects of myself, in the way that he sort of naively has gone about life and had to kind of be challenged and challenge, you know, himself. It's an amazing parable, fable, you know, and I would really encourage any of you to read this if you haven't yet, or pick it up again if you haven't read it for a long time. It's an amazing social commentary on, you know, the human condition, love, life, loss, you know, learning, growth, letting go, you know, about capitalism, socialism, all the pitfalls that can kind of be found in so many different aspects of life, and kind of just getting back to the bare bones of life, really, you know, and love. That's kind of what it's about. Very moving story, short as well, and when you get to know the writer as well, it's incredible if you read his background and his backstory. You know, our other main protagonist in this series is a pilot. I've always wondered with this book whether this is based on some sort of experience the actual author had in the desert, because he did crash a plane in the desert. This is partly what happens in The Little Prince. We have this protagonist of the pilot who the Little Prince comes across, who is trying to get his plane running and kind of get back out of the desert, you know. This adult that's getting taught these things by this sort of, you know, whether he's a child, you know, an alien, some other sort of being, you know, the Little Prince is quite an innocent person to a degree. And it's just very profound, and it's helped me come to an understanding of tarot in a much deeper sense, as I mentioned earlier, which I think is an attribute that's quite special to storytelling decks, and why I think they're important within our collections. Having these stories we're familiar with, these characters we're familiar with. Look at this, it's probably one of my favourite lovers of all time, Lover's card. The way it denotes so much about what that card means. If you know this story, how much he loved his rose, you know, the choice he had to make to leave, the choice he had to make to go back, you know, knowing that love ain't always easy, you know, he gets fed up with his rose, and that's why he leaves in the first place. It just highlights all these things so well, in such a moving way, if you're familiar with the story. And so this is why I always encourage people to look for decks that speak to and have attachments to stories you're familiar with and characters you're familiar with, because it may just help you come to a deeper understanding. I personally got this deck to do inner child work, partially shadow work, because I look at inner child work as shadow work, and to connect me to that, you know, connect me to that sort of part of myself, that Little Prince part of myself, you know, help me come to a better understanding of myself and my role in these cards, and how I feel when I come across these characters. And, you know, it's been helpful so far, and I feel it will continue to be. So yes, storytelling decks, particularly ones that we find very poignant and speak to the tarot so as it is, are very important, and you know, have them in our collection. So that's the Tarot of the Little Prince, guys. Check it out. It's a mass market deck. You can find it pretty easily at a relatively cheap price. So that's our first offering. Okay, next up, staying in that vein, particularly of children's tales, but again, I would say not completely when you think about it. In fact, I found this book very difficult to read as a child, and I wasn't particularly fond of the cartoon either. It has to be said, but I've garnered a kind of deeper appreciation of it as I've got older, and that is none other than, ooh, why is it upside down? There we go. Dame Darcy's Queen Alice Tarot, obviously speaking to you know, Alice Through the Looking Glass and Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. Wonderful box, isn't it? Such a beautiful indie deck. So what can I say about this deck, other than the fact that the art is just ridiculously cool? I really do love Dame Darcy's art. For those of you who may have seen her Mermaid Tarot as well, it's pretty cool. The only thing that bugs me slightly about this deck is that it's shiny cardstock and a bit slippy. But yes, Alice in Wonderland within a tarot deck. There's loads of them. There's a few, you know, Disney has one, Bubba Studios has one that actually looks really pretty cool, I have to say. Obviously Dame Darcy, there's been quite a few Alice decks, you know, and oracles. And it's not just because, you know, she's a popular pop culture kind of figure, I don't think. It has something to do with this story and how it deeply resonates a lot with our psyches. For me, sometimes in a kind of disturbing way, I have to be honest. Like I said, I wasn't too fond of this, the Disney cartoon of this when I was a child. I actually found it quite scary. You know, what is Alice doing other than diving really deep into the almost her own psyche in the way that she's gone underground here and ended up in, you know, Wonderland with all these really quite creepy and macabre characters. This actually for me has the potential and is used as a shadow work deck, because it does help you confront things, you know. It really does. That's what Alice is doing. There's a lot of very emotive energy in this deck, which I like. You know, it can be quite hard hitting, but it really does make you confront these cards, or in fact it really helps the cards confront you, really. And having these kind of familiar weird characters, you know, a lot of them is sort of ambiguous as well. It speaks to that sort of mysterious element, that things in life aren't always black and white, and it sort of helps me get to a bit more comfortable with that, because I can be quite a black and white person, has to be said. So to sort of be able to dance in that nuance, the way that Alice kind of, you know, and a lot of the figures do in this story, has been, you know, a very interesting ride, I have to say. It really has. You know, it's not just about having figures and characters in here that are aesthetically pleasing. These are characters that really, if you look on them and reflect on them now in an adult mind, they actually help you maybe confront some things, you know, about the modern age even. You know, the rabbit is a very key character in Alice in Wonderland, that he did inspire anxiety in me even from a child, you know, always, you know, that really fast, frenetic, anxious energy, you know, that sort of workaholic energy, that sort of, oh my goodness, you know, there's never enough time, you know, and life can feel like that, and we can kind of be in those energies at times, and it's really good to have those sort of characters to reflect on those aspects of ourselves. It's a really, really well done deck, I have to say. Look, we even have the Jabberwocky here, as the devil, all these attachments. Fairly sure that's the Jabberwocky. I'm still having to learn this story a bit more deeply, in all honesty, and this deck sort of helps me with that. But yeah, I guess this is the sort of flip side, you know, whereas the Tarot of the Little Prince, the story, like, I really love, I've really kind of really speaks to me, has sat well with me, etc. Alice in Wonderland and is not quite that. It's a bit of a jarring story for me, yet in sort of persisting with it and really, you know, diving in deep with it, it's helped me realize some of my resistances and fears, confront some fears actually. You know, particularly of the unknown, because that's what Alice in Wonderland speaks to a lot. It's like you're going into the unknown, you're kind of trapped in this world, a lot of crazy traumatic things are happening to you, but it was needed. She had to set off on this forged journey because in many ways she was very bored and despondent where she was at, you know. That's why she took the adventure, you know. She's a young girl in a certain age where only certain things are expected of women, and you know, she took that plunge. And if the Fool card isn't a card to encourage us to do that, I don't know what is. So yeah, that's why it has its place, you know. Like I said, it can be quite a jarring energy, a jarring story for me, in all honesty. But so we confront a few things, and that's what good stories do, you know. Sometimes they're not the ones that sit with you, you know, wholeheartedly, sit with you well in a wholehearted way. Sometimes they really do confront you and make you feel some sort of way, you know. And that's just as important as a story that resonates in a more loving kind of manner. So yeah, that's the two more like children's book offerings, I want to say. So what have we got next? Let's have a look. Okay, so last up in the sort of stepping into decks that I'm married with some of our fiction favourites. How could I miss it out? You guys, if you've been here before, come on, you know what's coming. You know what's coming. One of my favourite stories of all time. It is my trusted Lord of the Rings deck. Oh gosh. Obviously a bit more of a, I don't know, not quite a children's book, not quite an adult's book. It's for everyone really, isn't it? I mean, what can I say about this that I haven't said before? Again, the story, I have such a huge connection to it, means a lot to me on a personal level, has helped me through a lot in my life. It has to be said, such rich storytelling and world building, character building by J.R.R. Tolkien. It's just unbelievable how much depth this man brought to this story. That's what makes it feel so real, you know. The characters are so real, everything they go through feels so real, even though obviously it's in this fantasy realm. You know, he was drawing on a lot of the things he had seen in himself and others, you know, through the world wars and everything else that was going on in his life at the time, you know, the loves that he was experiencing, you know, his own love story, you know, the things he was seeing going on politically, socially, you know, the cultures he loved, the cultures he saw that had been decimated, the evils in the world he saw uprising, you know, and wanted to give that people that hope that they can be overcome. And that's what we turn to tarot for a lot of the time, I think, is hope, you know, to galvanize us, to give us that strength. And this is why a lot of us turn to stories as well, you know. That's what they're there to do, these stories of heroes, heroines, overcoming trials and tribulations. And I can't think of a story that does that more poignantly, for me personally, than The Lord of the Rings. This is my pick-me-up deck. This is my, you know, I can relate wholeheartedly to deck. This is my, you know, I've got your back deck. This is my don't forget the wisdom and the experience you've already accumulated deck, you know. This is my ground yourself again decks. It has so many facets to it, and it's all because of its rich storytelling and character building. And anyone who's a Lord of the Rings fans, please, if you can, get your hands on this deck. I think this personally is the most well done one that's available. I've heard that a new one's coming out. I haven't seen much of it, to be fair, but this one for me draws on both the movies and the stories. I'm not a purist, I love both. In fact, the movies were my kind of gateway into Lord of the Rings in the first place, you know. I'd only read The Hobbit before that. So, oh no, they're sliding off. So yes, if there's a deck that can really speak to that hope and that heartfelt kind of support that tarot can give us through its storytelling, it has to be this Lord of the Rings deck. So I encourage you to find, I really wish that, you know, a lot more of the kind of stories that mean a lot to us, you know, in this life would be translated into tarot. I think we need to kind of start pestering people more and creating more of a demand for this. I don't know if it's just me, because I do feel like a lot of us will get a lot from that. And I see so many of us, you know, when we was doing that tag about, you know, decks we wish existed, there was so many people that mentioned, you know, I wish this story, you know, whether it's from a TV show they really love, a book they really love, you know, a movie they really love. These are all stories. These are all ways of telling stories. How much they wanted that married with a tarot deck, you know. Let's bring those to life by the power of the people. You know, it's worthwhile. It really is. And yeah, what more can be said about this deck other than what I've already said? Get yourself a story. Get yourself a deck. I've probably said this already too many times in this video by now, but get yourself a deck that kind of marries to a story that means a lot to you. That's just, even if it's just one, I just think what you will get from it in your practice is just you know, it's just nothing but healing vibes, honestly, really and truthfully. So that's the Lord of the Rings Tarot, and I thought while we're here I'll do a little showcase of the Lord of the Rings Oracle, because this is not something I see spoken about quite a lot, has to be said. Zoom back out. It's out of print, I'm fairly sure, but you can find it second hand relatively easily. I found this on eBay. This is what it looks like. You can see it looks like a book. It's pretty cool. At first I thought it was just going to be quite gimmicky, to be honest, because we get this kind of clay Lord of the Rings, you know, Ring of Power. Let's open this up. We get guidebook, hardback. We get this map. So basically there's this whole, you know, if we want to, with this deck, I thought it was quite gimmicky, but actually it has to be said, it threw me how poignant it actually was. Like, obviously we can tie this and we see where it goes on the map. That's part of the system if you want to work with it that way. But back to it just as a pure deck. Oh my goodness, if I can get it out, guys. I do need to get a bag for this, I think. God, Shelob's there just lulling about at the bottom, doesn't want to come out. As a deck, like, to go along with our tarot, this is an oracle that befits the Lord of the Rings. You know, obviously tarot is something we use for advice. Oracle cards, to me, are more like that, you know, they're more of that advice energy from the get-go. Maybe that's just how I use them in my practice. I don't know, but that's what's so lovely about decks that are married with storytelling. You know, this common thread they share, particularly, like I said, this kind of advice, especially that I kind of marry with oracle decks. This is what stories are made for, you know. These are what fables, folk tales, you know, lore, what this has been about cross-culturally for millennia is about passing on lessons, passing on wisdom, passing on encouragement, passing on advice, you know, so it doesn't get lost, all tied up in things that we can more easily digest, because they take us, you know, they're at arm's length to a degree that makes sense. You know, here we're in a fantasy realm, you know, dragons, oh, for some they may, that's the Eye of Sauron, so I don't know why I'm saying dragons, but you know what I mean. Things like this, like, might not exist. But we know the emotions, we know the predicaments to a degree, how that makes us feel. So we can draw on that, and that can be more healing, I feel, when something's not too close to home. It's at a distance, but easy to understand. That's what stories are there for, you know, to help us grasp things in a way that sometimes straight talking just can't get across, you know. Sometimes you need a parable, sometimes you need a fable to do that. And this oracle I found very profound, to be honest. I really have, especially in terms of like advice and moving forward and speaking to that sort of energy. The book surprised me, it's very well done. This is by Terry Donaldson, by the way, if anyone's interested. You know, it gives esoteric meanings of the cards. telling you, you know, and then it has advice, you know, even gives you reverse meanings if you want to do that. But yeah, again, it just speaks to this wisdom getting passed on through the ages, through stories, and you know, that's a beautiful thing to have in our collections, especially when it's married to something that we like. So yeah, that's the Lord of the Rings oracle there. Hopefully, you know, if there's any more Lord of the Rings fans that's not heard of this, maybe that's something you might be wanting to get your hands on. Now I think we're going to move out of the more modern fiction and the kind of stories that, you know, we can be married with the tarot, and look a bit more into our ancient wisdom, you know, what our ancient cultures had to offer us, you know, still this kind of very primal storytelling, and see some decks that are associated with that. Right, we've zoomed out because it's a chunky monkey. So yeah, so first up we have the Celtic Wisdom tarot pack. So happy that I managed to get my hands on this, has to be said. And this is a deck that speaks a lot to, obviously, Celtic wisdom, you know, the kind of Celtic belief system, the Ogham, bardic legend, heroes and heroines from that culture, and all of that good stuff, basically. Gosh, so that was quite difficult to sort out. It's a chunky deck. Here we go. Let's zoom in a little bit. Those of you who've heard me speak about this, I bought this to be in touch with my ancestors, you know, to be in touch with the stories and the wisdom that they had to share, you know, many, many moons ago, that have luckily been, you know, have survived the test of time, have made it to this age, you know. Fortunately, we've lost a lot of kind of stories, you know, to sort of decimation of culture, which is so sad. But we are lucky that we do have these that remain. And I think there's something, you know, although I believe, you know, we're all beings of, you know, of the world, you know, and just because a certain culture you were born into or is part of your ancestry doesn't mean that it's the one that's going to resonate with you most. By no means. That these are open to us all to learn from, 100%. It's just nice to have a deck that I feel connects me to people who are in my lineage, and, you know, were telling these, you know, word of mouth at some point in time, you know, were maybe even living this at some point in time. You know, stories do connect us to our ancestors, they do connect us to our pasts, you know. And like I said, doesn't even necessarily have to be the culture you're in now. Who knows, you know, if a certain culture speaks to you now very strongly, you know, for me, that's an indication that may be something that you have ties to in a past life, because that is something that I believe in as well. So, you know, take these in where you can. It's just so amazing that we can look back at these tales that are very ancient, you know. These are from, you know, many, many moons ago, and they still have relevance today. That just tells you the power of storytelling, you know. It's the power of tarot as well, you know, how it still resonates to this day, because it's archetypal energy, you know. This stuff doesn't, you know, it doesn't dissipate. It is part of us, you know, part of us as souls, part of us as humans, things that we have to overcome in this 3D life. And it's just really magical to be able to kind of have these connections to stories and still learn from them to this day, you know, and have it in this sort of tarot system, you know. So it's a great book, you know. It tells you these stories are actually written down here, you know. This is something forever that's kind of make sure they don't get lost, hopefully, you know. Being able to write things down, you know, it was a pivotal moment in making sure knowledge didn't get lost, you know, in many ways. But the sheer fact that word of mouth kept these things going for generations says a lot as well. And we're so privileged to have access to these even now. So please, you know, if that speaks to you, if kind of folk tales in particular kind of speak to you, and tarot, do look at getting a deck that you feel connected to, you know, maybe from a culture you feel very connected to, whether that's something from your ancestral lineage or just something that just has a huge interest to you. Have a look into that, because I do feel like there's wisdom there, lost wisdom sometimes, you know, lost stories, things that remind us, you know, remind us of what we're missing in life, remind us of what life's actually about, you know. Find those connections. I feel like we're in a very disconnected age, you know. People say that we're all about progress, we're in the all this technological advances, all these beautiful things we're doing as humans in one way. But the flip side to that is we've lost touch. You know, there's a huge, vast waves of us that are very, you know, struggling from the impact of disconnection from the earth, disconnection from self, disconnection from family, feeling part of something, you know. And stories play a huge role, or can play a huge role in bringing that connection back into our lives, you know, especially ones that remind us of our relationships with nature, etc. And I feel like cross-culturally, folklore tends to do that, you know. We see it in a lot of cultures. We see it in the Celtic culture very strongly through the Ogam and the tree language. We see it in Japanese culture very strongly when they speak about Kodama, all the sort of yokai and spirits of the forest, you know, being at one with things like that, or things going wrong, calamity ensuing. We see it very strongly in sort of the indigenous people of America's stories, you know, in our African tales. So much wisdom, so much connection to the earth through these stories, and that's such an important element to bring back, I think, into our lives. So why not do it through decks, eh? So yeah, that was quite long-winded and kind of went off a little bit on tangents, but I hope you got my gist there. So yeah, guys, that's the Celtic Wisdom Tarot. Fairly sure it's out of print. I got it for a steal for my birthday, which I can't believe, but definitely look out for it on eBay because it does come up. Yeah, staying in that vein, but we're moving, you know, we're moving across cultures now. We're making our way over to Japan via a French deck. I mean, dang, okay, we're getting very cross-cultural here. And believe me, by the end of this, I'm going to have convinced you to buy some decks that are not in your native tongue, genuinely. I mean, I may have a whole video about this coming up. But first of all, Marine from Waves of Your Soul, thank you for introducing me to this deck. I'm so glad I took the plunge and got it, because, you know, stories from other cultures, do not be scared to take them in. Stories written in other languages, don't be afraid to take them in. Speaking of that sort of nod to the technological age in the ancient world, we now have something called Google Translate, a very good app that translated this deck very well for me. I have to say, some grammatical errors, but I could basically made my whole own English version of this book, which we can get out so we can have a little see. For you French speakers, there won't need to be any translations, but yes, Japanese culture, Shinto as a religion, kami, yokai, that's something that's interested me for a long time, and couldn't really find decks for it, and there was this one, and I was like, oh, it's in French, should I get it, should I not? Should that sort of gatekeep whether I, you know, step into these stories, get to know them? And I chose no, it shouldn't gatekeep. I'm going to get it regardless, and I'll find my way, you know, thanks to the technological age. So here we are, marrying everything to bring about growth and to kind of unlock wisdom from another culture through story. Honestly, this is a beautiful deck. Cardstock, shape, size, you know, even the backs look aesthetically beautiful. But like I said, this tag is about story and storytelling. Where this deck shines immensely is in its tales, particularly of these yokai and kami, what they mean, what they stand for, and also what they mean for us in our lives, you know. It's a wonderful project. Honestly, I have to give the creators Caroline Dubin and the illustrator Laurence Resson their props for this, because it's a wonderfully curated deck, wonderfully written deck. You know, it's wonderful just to see and hear of these mystical, magical creatures, you know, that we aren't familiar with if you're from, you know, if you're from a European background. You know, these are not tales that we grew up with in the same way that we might have grown up with, you know, our friend over here, Aesop's fables, for example. But our lives will be made richer for them, nevertheless, you know. So step into that, you know, if you can. Step into other cultures, you know. I feel like we are in an age, I spoke about it a little bit in the past video of mine, of some sort of tentative energy surrounding that because of these terms like cultural appropriation, etc. But there's knowledge to be shared, there's wisdom to be kind of gained, and understanding and compassion to be kind of fostered through this sort of sharing of stories, sharing of wisdom, sharing of practices. And I don't feel like it should be shied away from, you know, because stories are a wonderful way to connect us all, you know. You don't have to be from Japan to sort of understand the kind of the raw sort of personality types of some of these yokai and kami, and the stories that are kind of connected to them. You really don't, because, you know, we can draw upon so many mythos, you know, so many characters, gods, deities that have this very similar energy, right? Because, you know, they're connected to us as humans. I actually this week went to see some traditional Japanese folk tales being told and played out and acted with really beautiful kind of traditional music as well, and it was honestly one of the most enjoyable experiences of my year. You know, sat right in the front row because I was there a bit late, and became, you know, there was a bit of audience participation, but I will remember it for the rest of my life. You know, it was so much fun. You know, the Japanese have such a great sense of humor. You know, they really do, and they inject that in their stories very, very well. You know that. And it lifts you. I just love looking at this deck, not only aesthetically. I find the stories, some of them are bizarre, some of them are heartbreaking, some of them are a bit scary, some of them are just funny. And they all have something to offer. And to have that in an oracle deck is amazing. It really is. I cannot wait because for those of you who are lucky enough to have that first edition of that, is it the Yokai Tarot? Oh my goodness, I've said it wrong probably. They're finally doing another one. I cannot wait, honestly. But that, you know, we have similar things married with that as a tarot system. So gosh, I look forward to seeing any of you want to get involved in this tag and have that to tell me about that, deck, because I would love to add that to my collection. But I'm rambling because of how much I love folklore, particularly Japanese folklore. But yeah, it surprised me how wonderful this deck is. The advice it gives you, the way in which it gives you advice, how it's teaching you at the same time about a culture you might not be familiar with. An amazing learning resource, honestly. So yeah, guys, if you're interested in anything from that neck of the woods, and you're not a French speaker, please do not be put off. You literally, it doesn't take too much work to make an English version of the guidebook for yourself. So yeah, that is the Oracle of the Kami and Yokai. Wonderful, wonderful deck. Wonderful storytelling deck. Honestly, just a great learning resource as well. Fun to learn about new cultures. You know, that's the way I look at it, and very enriching. So staying in Japan, so why not? Gosh, I really want to visit, but that's going to be a bit of a save up in a few years to come kind of job. But next up, we have the very beautiful Botan Tarot. Now, this is different. We're stepping away from kind of ancient stories now, and we're going more into, you know, I don't know, this one's partly ancient, but also I feel like they're very original stories by the creator, A. Miyako. I think it's a combination of two, if I'm right. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone else who's more familiar with this deck. But yes, how fascinating is that? not only are you making a tarot deck, and it's honestly one of the most aesthetically pleasing decks you will ever come across in your life, no cap, as the youngsters say. Look at it, linen finish, look at it, just can we? Yeah, not only have we got that, we've had someone that's literally created this whole anthology of stories that run throughout, you know. It's a bit daunting, I have to be honest, because when I first got this, I didn't have the anthology. Now I do. We'll have a look through that in a second. Created a whole sort of rich storytelling anthology in this, you know, that sort of splits the kind of suits into certain kingdoms, botanical kingdoms, different flowers that have, you know, the symbology is rich, especially within Asian culture, Japanese culture particularly for this deck. So enriching, you know, you're getting several layers of stories in this. You're getting flower language stories, historical meanings of flowers, and what they mean for us, you know, these beautiful characters that have been created, each of them, you know, intertwined in each other's stories, and we see these court cards played out throughout the minors, you know. It's fascinating, you know, the court cards, and even these characters in the major arcana. It's just wonderful, a wonderful project. And yeah, it takes some time to learn, but, you know, it's fun. It's fun to learn. If you're someone who likes story, who likes reading, things of that nature, wants to kind of have a new spin on tarot, wants to have these new original stories, you know, that draw on that, you know, coming of age themes, you know, what do they say, there could only be 7 themes in stories, right? But that's all we need, because, you know, human life really and truthfully isn't as complex as we make it out to be when it gets down to the bare bones. This deck is a good reminder of that, you know, for me anyway. It's just very wonderfully done. Gives you some new insights, you know, when you're looking at something from a different culture's perspective. Again, it gives us an insight into this artists and their sort of personal contributions to, you know, our collective human story. It's, you know, especially with this tower, this is very poignant. This is about something that's linked to her grandmother being in a concentration camp. You know, look at it, and it's all kind of been abandoned now. It's just a beautiful kind of nod to the real life stories with that, you know, and how the Japanese are treated at certain points. It's just got so many layers, beautiful layers of story, both truthful, well, they're all truthful, you know, whether they're fiction or non-fiction, there's truth to be gleaned in every story. And through immersing ourselves in these stories, there's truths to be gleaned within ourselves. That's what I believe. And this is it's quite a gentle deck in which to do that, I believe. You know, it takes you in a very, like, the word isn't, I wouldn't quite call it whimsical, but magical though, for sure. And it's just wonderful, honestly. I'm not sure if they're doing another run of this, maybe. So check it out if it's up your alley, but that's the Botan Tarot. Let's put you away. So next up, staying in the land of original stories created for a tarot system, this is the very wonderful, I should probably open it up first, Cosmic Cycles Tarot. This is a tarot that caught my eye, again from Marine, from the Waves of Your Soul. Gosh, honestly, so many, right? Such a great channel. Was very hard to get hold of, because it had a few issues of Kickstarters, I think, and then being pre-ordered was like, literally was done like that. And then I found it secondhand, bought it, and haven't looked back. Why this is a wonderful deck, it's a very modern deck in terms of the age that it's set in, connects us to our stories of now, but it follows characters, and you will see these same characters pop up in different cards, which I find really fascinating, to be honest. it talks you through kind of, like I said, modern, like, you know, I don't want to say, you know, first world problems and things like that. These are like genuine things that people are going through. We see sort of nods to divorce, you know, we see nods to, you know, relationship breakdowns, you know, road trips, you know, overcoming sort of physical illness here, you know, as the strength card, physio, you know, being the shy one, you know, going on your first date, you know, custody cases. It's so poignant. These everyday interactions, these everyday life stories that we're making up ourselves as we go through life. You know, each of us is living, you know, a story, you know, not acting out a story per se, but, you know, we do have a story that we're weaving into this human consciousness right now, and human existence. We're all playing a role somewhere in that. And this deck sort of keeps us in touch with this sort of present aspect of that, I think. It's just very beautiful, you know, it's like a whole world here, almost like, oh, I want to know more about her. Like, I'm sure in the guidebook it gives people names as well, which is very nice. It lets you know which cards that they're coming in and why their story is like in that way, like why they're turning up in certain cards. It's just a really, you know, a really good deck for keeping us in these sort of present day stories, I think. Helping us reflect on these things that might be a little bit more close to home, you know. A bit different to, like I said, these sort of stories of old that are a bit removed sometimes, you know, might be speaking in terms of anthropomorphic kind of animals and things like that. You know, a bit more, this is a bit more real life, and, you know, those stories can be just as poignant, you know, because we're looking at individuals or characters that are made up. They're living lives very similar to ours, you know, or maybe lives we would want. I love this Page of Wands, I really do. Her climbing that tree. It's a very well thought out deck. Again, great character building, and like I said many times before, for me, especially with court cards and even part of the majors, I would say I like having really fleshed out characters kind of given to them in the tarot system, whether it's from, like, I can draw upon fiction I'm familiar with, that's like, okay, so that's what they mean by King of Cups, that's what they mean by that High Priestess energy, I understand, you know, if that makes sense. I can draw upon that rather than just seeing this sort of stoic looking figure that just looks a bit different with a coin in one hand, a cup in another card, you know. Give me their energy and I'll better understand what that card means to me when I'm pulling it. Stories do that very well because of their use of character. That's why these decks are so important. And this one really reflects characters that are very, very close to home, like I said, in this modern age. We have a teacher here, the Queen of Cups. How sweet. She's staying late after work, making all the crowns for the kids. How sweet is that? You know, who thinks of a nursery or kindergarten teacher of a Queen of Cups? That's a great person to attribute to that, right? You know, that, think of that really caring, mothering, nurturing kind of teacher you may have had. That's a very Queen of Cups energy. Two of Swords, look at this one. A child in this sort of horrible kind of predicament of, who do I pick, mum or dad? You know, really, you know, that Two of Swords moment can be very shattering, you know. It's amazing. Look, Three of Swords, he's listening to heartbreaking music because he has been in a breakup in this deck. So yeah, that is the Cosmic Cycles Tarot guy. If you're looking for a bit more of a modern kind of deck that speaks to that storytelling and that storyteller in you, or the person who sort of gets a lot from stories, then check it out. It's wonderfully made as well, honestly. It's rose petals. It is very well made, it has to be said. Even if there were potential production issues with it. And then next up, I thought I'd just mention a deck that I don't think many people would necessarily class as storytelling, but it is an oracle that I pair with that cosmic cycles, because I feel like there is a lot of story contained within the imagery in this deck. Just one small picture really says a lot, and that's the Believe in Your Own Magic oracle. I don't really know, like this I had sort of put away and forgotten about, which I regret slightly, because I feel like I should have put that in my healing decks tag, but yeah, I've mentioned it now. Very healing deck, very good one for boosting your kind of confidence and self-esteem, you know, that sort of big sister kind of support and hug. And just look at it, it's like a sort of fairy tale aspect to it. It's modern, updated fairy tale. Look, we have this, you know, figure almost, you know, she doesn't need rescuing from that tower, she's rescuing herself. And Amanda Lovelace, I'm fairly sure she's written a few books, I think that is one of hers, like, you know, in this one, the damsel in distress ace herself, or something of that nature. But look, these cards, these images, they tell, for me anyway, they tell a story. They really do, and I like that about them. And they keep you in this modern world. They give you even cues for things to kind of do in your own life, actually, in some of these. Like, go read a book, go and relax in this kind of way, go get your hair cut, you know. You know, go sit with friends in the living room. You know. For me, this is like everyday stories. And I like that. So they connect to me to the everyday. Helping you connect back to yourself as well, I think. Like I said, can you see what I mean? It's like one image, but there's like, you can tell a whole story from this. I guess it's almost like, do you know what's just come to mind as I've said this, is this idea of path working as well, that people, the practice that people do with their decks. Oh, that definitely adds to that storytelling element. I think a lot of storytelling decks would be great for that, actually. Putting yourself in the card. As an oracle deck, I think this has actual potential for that, really, come to think of it. Confidence, it comes with time and practice. I have a whole story just from one image. She could be there waiting to go to a job interview, but really feeling like, oh my goodness, have I got it in me? It's a fantastic deck. Not strictly like a storytelling one in the sense of the others that I've shown, but I feel like it has that storytelling element that helps connect us back to self, you know. So that's why I wanted to put it in. And I think, yes, I think we have made it onto our last offering, which is, let me zoom back out because it's a chunky monkey again, the Forest of Enchantment Tarot. It has to be in here because to me it definitely is. It's a story of going through the enchanted forest, and also has a lot of fairy tale energy and connections, I would say, you know, and to other sort of works of fiction. Cara from Moonlight Arcana told me that the kind of goblin cards in this is related to the Goblin Market, which is a famous poem. So yes, we have a few kind of stories that this deck draws upon, apparently. Folk tales and lore. So it couldn't not be in here. And you know, I've wanted a fairy tale deck for a long time, and this is the one, the closest to it for sure. We have this again, that energy, you know, with this Hansel and Gretel kind of imagery here. Very interesting, the stories it marries with certain things, because it gives you different perspective. Free of Challenges here is actually the father leaving the children, and in the book the sort of description just gives you a complete flip reverse of a Three of Swords moment, looking at it from the person who's had to abandon, you know, had to leave, had to reject, or maybe not had to but has, you know, and how we deal with that when we've done that ourselves, and the heartbreak that can ensue from that. Again, it has these very strong characters. Look, if this isn't Merlin, I don't know who it is, you know. The Magician helps us to understand the characters better, helps us to understand the nuance in some of these cards sometimes, you know. it grounds them in something we're familiar with, story, you know, fairy tales. And I love it. It's so magical, and like I said, it gives its own perspective on things, and which is very different, very, very different to a lot of other decks, I have to say. But also very comforting. I do find this deck very warm, very comforting, the way, like, when you're being sat down and kind of read fairy tales as a child, you know, there is that element to it, and that I find very warm, very comforting, very healing, actually. This deck definitely shows the role that fairy tales can have in our sort of healing, you know. Because even though this is an enchanted forest that, you know, in a lot of kind of lore, they can be quite foreboding places, it feels like quite a safe space to explore ourselves, our psyche, you know. It feels like you're literally walking through this woods, this forest yourself. It really does. Look at all the characters that we're meeting, you know, and this is what life is like. Or can be like. Such a rich deck, honestly. Thanks again to Sandy from Exploring Tarot for gifting me this so kindly, and honestly check out her kind of exploration of this. It's just been fascinating to go through. But this is storytelling for you, you know. Rich storytelling. Look at this, I love this Six of Spells, you know, the little dragon that's been hatched, you know, probably first one in the millennia. Look how happy everyone is, you know, baby being born. Wonderful. Fairy tales have a very specific place in my heart, and I think in a lot of our kind of hearts and psyches, you know, because, you know, for those of us that like might kind of resonate, like might really like be connected to Fae energy particularly, it marries those two worlds together, that, you know, those rich storytelling, but actually being part of that world with them. It also, you know, these are stories a lot of us are familiar with from childhood, brings us back to that and understanding ourselves. This is why this can be a very good inner child work, actually, inner child work deck. Coming to a deeper understanding of ourselves by coming to a deeper understanding of these stories. You know, when we're a child and we look at these fairy tales, they have a certain meaning to us. When you reread them as an adult, sometimes it's like, oh wow, like you see your own growth and elevation, you see new things, you know. Or even you step in, you know, fairy tales, you know, a lot of them were sort of, you know, for children, somewhat understandably dumbed down a little bit, you know, because they were quite dark. And then if you go back to some of them as an adult and you actually kind of analyze them, it becomes fascinating. Things don't become as black and white as what maybe they were for you as a child. Like, who is, you know, who is is there evil here, or is that just someone that's, you know, troubled? An anti-hero even. So I love that stories make us question ourselves, because we should always be searching for a deeper understanding of self. I think story is such a wonderful way to do that, and why not marry that with the tarot? So yeah, fairy tales in particular. So yeah guys, that's the last deck. That is the Forest of Enchantment tarot there. Couldn't not put that in. I'd love to get a few more fairy tale decks, to be honest. I think the Lisa Hunt one is coming back out if I remember rightly, so that would be great. So yeah guys, let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you're going to join in on this tag. Please do. If it is up your alley, it'd be really fun to see all of your offerings, you know, in the whole storytelling tarot realm. Let me know what you think about the kind of importance of stories in our lives and across cultures, you know, or any story that has meant a lot to you and has kind of helped you. I'd really be interested to kind of see if anyone else can resonate and kind of relate to that, and you may be giving me some new stories to kind of pick up and learn from. You know, I'm always interested in that for sure. And like I said, this was a shameless kind of attempt for you to all tell me your storytelling deck so I can buy more. Even though I really shouldn't be buying any more decks at the moment, but yeah, so please do get involved if you feel called to. Yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. It's always nice, you know, to get a bit of love, as it were. But yeah, and if you enjoy the content, you like being here at the Treehouse, you know, feel free to subscribe. This is lovely to have you here, and there'll hopefully be more good kind of tags and content coming your way. I'm thinking of sort of branching out into this whole like storytelling thing, so you know, watch this space, you know, tales from the tarot tree, why not? There's a lot of things to learn from stories, and maybe we could go through some together. But yeah, I don't know how to end this. I'm very rambly and all over the place today. I'm not very succinct like a story. I'm a bit Alice in Wonderland, it has to be said. I really think he must have been on drugs when he was writing that, honestly. It was such a difficult book to read. But yeah, I'll leave you guys to it. Enjoy yourselves wherever you are, and I wish you all the best. See you in the next one. Bye.